Where do humans come from? Or to put it another way, when did we truly earn the title of human? That question may sound profound, but let's allow science to guide us. Relying on fossil discoveries and advances in genetic research, solid and reliable evidence, we will trace the path of evolution to find the very first form in human history. To make this journey more vivid and accessible, we will weave in reasonable assumptions and imaginative, evidence-based scenarios. Today, you and I will travel back 25 million years to meet our distant ancestors, creatures who endured and evolved over millions of years, slowly shaping what would make humans distinct from all other life on Earth. About 25 million years ago, Earth was entering a period of global warming. At the same time, the ancient Tethys Sea was gradually closing in the Middle East, paving the way for African tropical rainforests to expand northward. Our distant ancestors followed these forests, quickly spreading across vast territories, becoming the lords of the treetops and evolving into hundreds of primate species, from the giant ape, Larma ape to Civipithecus, stretching their range from Europe all the way to China. This was the golden age of apes, a world teeming with our primitive relatives, thriving deep within ancient jungles. But among those hundreds of species, which one was the true common ancestor of humanity? Around 13 million years ago, in the Mediterranean region, possibly in what is now Spain, a unique species called Pierolopithecus lived in a tropical rainforest. The name comes from the Pierola region, where its fossil was discovered. For simplicity in storytelling, let's call this creature Little Pie. Little Pie lived mainly in trees, fed mostly on fruit, and was relatively large, making it less agile on thin branches. Rather than leaping from branch to branch like monkeys, Little Pie often hung beneath the branches and swung through the trees. Interestingly, scientists discovered that Little Pie could stand upright and walk on large branches. This raises a fascinating hypothesis. The human hallmark of bipedalism, walking on two legs, may not have originated on the ground, but rather up in the trees. Imagine a young, male Pierolopithecus who has just been forced to leave his old group, a common event when males reach maturity. Now isolated, he begins to search for a new group to join, since solitude in the primate world means danger and disadvantage. By chance, he comes upon a new group, where his fate might be decided. But every group has its own territory, and welcoming a stranger is never easy. A young female with her infant appears, cautious and wary. Up in the trees, an older female seems more open. In the distance, a mature male, the leader, watches coldly and carefully. The young male understands that to be accepted, he must make an impression. He attempts to approach, showing signs of submission. Tension rises. The leader does not attack but issues threats through posture and growls. His first effort fails, but strangely, the emotions the young male expresses, loneliness, anxiety, unease, seem to affect the others. It appears that our ancestors were beginning to develop a rare trait in the animal kingdom: empathy, the ability to understand and be moved by another's emotions. This may have been the origin of compassion. The older female hesitates. She senses the stranger's loneliness and starts to pay attention to him. Empathy is a subtle but powerful force, though we must note that this is a hypothesis based on behavioral studies and not yet fully verifiable. In Pierolopithecus society, females typically stayed in the group they were born into for life, while males were forced to leave upon maturity. The question arises, does the older female's sympathy mean the young male will be accepted? Not necessarily. He is still kept at a distance and needs time to prove his worth. As night falls, a critical turning point occurs. Our ancestors knew how to build nests in trees to sleep. This behavior is not innate but learned, usually from the mother. These nests allowed them to sleep more deeply and safely throughout the night. And high-quality sleep is a key factor in the development of intelligence. Scientists believe that deep sleep enables the brain to process information effectively, retain important memories, and that the skill of nest building has been passed down through generations, even to us today. The next morning, the group descends to the forest floor to forage for food. The young male quietly follows, hoping for another chance to approach the older female. Though primarily frugivores, these creatures could digest various types of food. The young male makes an important decision. He approaches the older female again. In the dense forest, Where vegetation is both abundant and potentially toxic, the ability to distinguish safe plants is a survival skill, and that can only be passed down through teaching, mothers showing their young how to recognize and gather plants. That tradition is the earliest root of what we now call culture. The experienced female does not reject the young male. Understanding that a kind gesture can foster goodwill, the young male offers her a fig, a simple yet meaningful gift. She accepts it. This is the right moment to try communication. Their language is primarily based on grooming, a behavior that conveys more emotional messages than any vocal sound. However, approaching a female in the group can provoke the leader's anger. And indeed, the leader reacts with a threatening posture, but this time the females appear to side with the young male, forming a silent alliance that forces the alpha to back down. The social structure of the time may have weighed heavily on sexual dynamics in determining power, though this too remains an unconfirmed theory. The young male has just crossed a crucial milestone. He has been accepted by the older female. In return, she grooms him, a gesture that signifies trust and bonding. To ease tension, Australopithecus may have developed a behavior resembling a smile, a friendly signal to prevent conflict. While we cannot say with certainty what these behaviors meant, this hypothesis is supported by observational studies of modern primates. Our ancestors once lived in a true paradise, a world where fruit-laden forests were abundant, clean water flowed year-round, and the climate was mild. The only real threats came from predators, and to survive, they had to become keenly alert to every small sign in the jungle, a level of awareness that was truly remarkable. But that golden age did not last. A massive geological upheaval was about to occur, bringing profound changes to their habitat. Though the young male had been accepted by some members of the group, he still lingered on its outskirts. The old leader remained a clear threat. To be fully recognized, he had to do something truly useful. And then the moment came. The young male used a small stick to carefully probe into a hollow log to extract white termites, an action considered one of the earliest forms of tool use. This is a reasonable assumption about the early emergence of tool-based thinking. Not necessarily that Little Pi invented it, but his behavior marked a turning point in evolution. The wooden stick became an extension of the hand, a primitive expression of tool imagination. The group noticed something special about the young male. Just then, a young one accidentally consumed a toxic plant, and its body began to react violently. The young male immediately recognized the plant and, as if carrying some knowledge of herbal remedies, hurried to find a detoxifying plant. While we call this herbal medicine, partly out of imagination, his actions saved the young one's life and earned the trust of the other females, especially the younger one who had once doubted him. The story of the young male reflects something crucial in human evolution: the sharing of knowledge. When males left their original groups, they brought with them experience, and if accepted in a new group, they passed that knowledge on. This was a kind of knowledge migration, planting seeds for future generations. From that moment, the young male officially became a member of the group. But just as bonds began to solidify, the ground began to tremble. The cooling climate era had begun. Geological shifts caused the African plate to collide with the Eurasian plate, shrinking the rainforests and replacing them with arid savannas. The Asian apes lost their ideal environment and began migrating south. The Mediterranean Sea once dried up, forming a vast basin, and it may have been through this barren region that Australopithecus and its descendants crossed into Africa, where lush vegetation was starting to return. There, our ancestors continued to evolve, adapt, and develop increasingly complex abilities. One of the most remarkable descendants of that lineage was the species Sahelanthropus, also known as Tumai, who lived about 7 million years ago near Lake Chad. Tumai might have been the last common ancestor between modern humans and chimpanzees. With Tumai's appearance, the evolution of humankind began to accelerate dramatically. Tumai still slept in trees but spent most of the day on the ground, where food sources were more abundant. Caring for the young took longer because they needed to learn how to use tools to process food. Females seemed to play a more active role in innovation. Perhaps they were the first to come up with new ways to utilize natural resources. However, This is a hypothesis based on observations of modern behavior. Tumai took another step forward on the path of bipedalism, a posture that freed the hands and paved the way for breakthroughs in tools, language, and thinking. Tumai's society may have been patriarchal, with clear hierarchies. Dominant males held power through strength, and society became more competitive. To maintain authority, leaders needed alliances, through persuasion, intimidation, or cooperation with influential individuals. Such complex social interactions were the prelude to primitive political structures. The new land where Tumai lived had rich river systems, providing abundant aquatic food sources. This encouraged individuals to form tighter social bonds. Both males and females could temporarily leave their groups to establish ties with others. This was a significant evolutionary step in human society, laying the foundation for broad, interconnected communities. One day, tragedy struck. A young one suddenly died. The death shocked the group. Tumai seemed to grasp the importance of community. Each individual was an irreplaceable piece. Losing one brought immense grief. Life on the ground offered new opportunities but also carried many risks. The treetops remained a safe haven. Yet something was changing in our ancestors' brains. The mother of the deceased young one refused to leave the body. She wasn't merely driven by instinct. She seemed to feel something beyond that, loss. The next day, the Tumai group encountered another group. The rival group had 2 females and territory rich in resources. The leader of our group became ambitious to claim both mates and land. But the rival group had a large, formidable leader. The idea of using force began to take shape. A confrontation occurred, but Tumai did not fight alone. His group joined forces, defeated the rival, and claimed the new territory. This was an early form of warfare, though we use that word only for convenience, not to equate it with modern wars. The grieving young female had yet to recover from the trauma of losing her child. She refused to part from the body. The question arose, whatever once lived inside that body, where had it gone? Perhaps Tumai had begun to form the earliest notions of death. We cannot know for certain, but it appears they sensed the finite nature of life. In the face of that loss, the group gathered around the young one's body, as if to say farewell, to express shared sorrow. This may have been the first sign of what we call ritual, symbolic gestures of parting and remembrance. If so, then the formation of concepts like time and endings marked a major milestone in our journey to becoming truly human. Around 5 million years ago, Africa began to dry out and dense forests started to shrink in patches. In this changing landscape, the descendants of Tumai began to split into 2 evolutionary paths. Some followed the line of chimpanzees and gorillas, abandoning bipedalism and returning to life in the trees. The others continued down the human evolutionary road, spreading across Africa, particularly in East Africa. There, a new extended family gradually emerged, Australopithecus, or the southern apes, with prominent members such as Lucy and Australopithecus africanus. By around 2 million years ago, in southern Africa, a new branch appeared, Australopithecus sediba. This species remains a topic of debate among scientists. Was it the final descendant of the Australopithecines, or the very first true human? We still don't have a definitive answer. Sediba lived in an increasingly arid environment. They still relied on the treetops to evade predators, and only descended when absolutely necessary. During the peak of the dry season, when trees bore no fruit, they had to dig up roots and tubers from the ground, chewing for hours to extract enough nutrients to survive. In that harsh setting, a young male wandered alone. He had no mate. Females usually clustered around the strongest male for protection and access to food. The lifespan of Sediba was relatively short. An elderly female with worn-down teeth could no longer chew roots and survived solely on bone marrow. But the group leader never shared food with the weak. Then the young male, perhaps out of empathy or something deeper, helped the old female by chewing food for her so she could survive. We don't know his exact motive, but that action stands as proof of evolving emotional depth, rising above mere survival instinct. At this point, the entire Sediba species teetered on the brink of extinction. They had to adapt, or disappear. Fortunately, Sediba possessed a more advanced brain and inherited skills from their ancestors. The pressure to survive forced them to try new ways of living. One day, they stumbled upon the carcass of a recently deceased animal, a trove of fatty, fresh meat, unlike anything they'd encountered. This was the first time they ventured so far from the trees, but hunger overpowered their fear of the wide, exposed grasslands. These bold individuals had no idea their choice would forever alter the course of human evolution. Before them lay a fresh carcass full of meat and organs, especially bone marrow and brain matter, the richest sources of energy. The explorers returned excitedly, sharing their find. For the first time, the group ate their fill. But would meat consumption really ensure long-term survival? Not necessarily. When an individual challenged the authority of the leader or disrupted the social order, the consequences could be dire. That young male, despite his intelligence and capability, was powerless in the face of brute force. In that society, power still reigned supreme. The elderly female, having nothing left to lose, was the only one who stood by the oppressed. Meat was easier to digest than plants, rich in energy, and over time, required less digestive effort, freeing up energy that could be redirected to the brain. In this way, intelligence and physical form began to shift. Muscle strength was no longer the sole weapon for survival. Intellect began to rise, paving the way for a new generation. Sadiba already used stones to smash roots, but now they needed new tools to process large animal carcasses. One individual, experimenting, struck two rocks together and accidentally created a sharp-edged fragment. This was the beginning of stone tool-making, a process requiring experience and teaching. Our ancestors' greatest advantage wasn't just dexterous hands, but a growing imagination and the ability to envision the next steps. That young male began rallying group members to search for more carcasses and bring them back. He described his idea using gestures and sounds to persuade others. Of course, we can't know how developed their language was. This part leans into creative storytelling based on archaeological and behavioral evidence. The leader realized his dominance was being challenged, and he also understood muscle alone was no longer enough. Eventually, he agreed to the plan. The group, enticed by the promise of a feast, ventured into unfamiliar lands filled with danger. Sadiba was a vulnerable species. When they left the trees, they were almost defenseless. But their craving for meat drove them into new territories, searching for remnants left behind by predators. No one could have predicted that these scavengers would one day become the masters of Earth. In that wild world, those who arrived first got a share. Those who came later had to go hungry. Everything operated according to an invisible order. Leaving the trees was a gamble, and humanity's fate may have hinged on two choices: retreat to safety and hunger, or advance into danger for a chance at survival. Survival instincts urged them to seek shelter, but out there beneath the blazing sunlight of the savannah, a better life might await. Eventually, the group split. One followed a young female who dared to step beyond the safe zone. The other stayed beneath the familiar canopy. Ironically, it was the weaker individuals who made the right choice, at least from an evolutionary standpoint. They were willing to trade comfort for risk in pursuit of a brighter future. The stronger ones clung to their existing privileges. Those who left were guided by imagination, a concept entirely new in the animal kingdom. They dared to dream of another world, one with more food, safety, and freedom. Of course, we can't know what they truly thought. These are plausible inferences based on archaeological and behavioral evidence. Even the frail old female chose to leave, driven by hope. And that land truly existed, a fertile, vast place capable of nurturing a new kind of species. Without the extraordinary courage of those ancestors, we might not be here today. Those who stayed behind may have been ancestors of Homo habilis or Paranthropus. They lingered a while longer, but eventually succumbed to climate change and went extinct. For a long time, scientists believed Lucy, representing Australopithecus afarensis, was our direct ancestor. But today, that idea is less certain. Many researchers now argue that Lucy may have been a side branch that eventually died out, a close cousin, but not directly ancestral to us. Even so, Lucy remains a milestone in humanity's understanding of the past. After Sediba, a new species emerged, more advanced in mobility and adaptability, that was Homo erectus, the upright human. Around 5 million years ago, geological changes altered the global climate. initiating an ice age that turned the Sahara into a desert. Around 2 million years ago, herds of grazing animals began to migrate out of Africa, and Homo erectus, driven by hunting instincts and survival needs, followed them. Some of them migrated to Europe, while others crossed into Asia, traversing mountains, jungles, deserts, and swamps to reach faraway lands never before touched by apekind. One branch traveled very far, reaching northern China. They became the first humans to set foot outside Africa, a monumental journey that opened the door to humanity's global dispersion. Homo erectus had bodies like natural athletes. Tall builds, long legs, well-balanced frames. Their bodies were highly efficient at cooling. Shorter body hair, more developed sweat glands, and a circulatory system in the brain that regulated heat during long exertions. They may not have been fast, but they were incredibly enduring, an undeniable advantage in persistence hunting. When prey became exhausted, they would move in for the kill. Thanks to this stamina, Homo erectus gradually became true hunters. No longer just scavengers, they began coordinating hunts like packs of wolves. Power started shifting away from the physically strongest to the smartest individuals. The physical gap between males and females narrowed. In some groups, a wise and experienced older female might even lead the entire band. She became the soul of the group, the keeper of knowledge, memory, and vision. Of course, these ideas are inferred from archaeological traces and modern ape behavior. They cannot be confirmed absolutely. Homo erectus didn't just adapt to their environment, they began to alter it. They built shelters, the first true homes, sometimes fenced with branches. Thus began the formation of seasonal camps, where each member had a role: tool making, meat processing, shelter building, hide tanning, or skill sharing. Tasks became increasingly specialized, leading to pressure, competition, and conflict. Leaders had to learn fairness, especially in food distribution, sometimes favoring key individuals to preserve alliances and balance power. Though these are still hypotheses, they help us imagine the early formation of social structures. To protect their bodies, Homo erectus used animal hides, tree bark, and plant fibers for clothing. But this introduced a new problem. Parasites like lice began to appear. The fear of predators was gradually replaced by a new fear: fire. Fire was an uncontrollable force, capable of destroying everything. In the dry season, lightning strikes sparked forest fires. Camps were destroyed, herds fled, and Homo erectus had to escape. But amidst the ashes, they smelled something new: roasted meat, irresistibly alluring. Burned animals left behind cooked meat, fragrant, soft, and easier to chew than raw flesh. From that moment, humans began to realize the magic of fire, cooking food. Heat made tough roots more digestible. The digestive system now needed less energy, and the saved energy was redirected to the brain, allowing it to grow and function more efficiently. Large jaws became unnecessary, and Homo erectus developed more refined faces and lighter bodies. And with this came the rise of intelligence. The brain became an energy-hungry machine, and with enough fuel, it began producing unprecedented things: associations, creativity, emotions, and possibly even aesthetic awareness. We cannot pinpoint the exact moment when a sense of beauty emerged, but many scientists believe it began during this era. After their first taste of roasted meat, Homo erectus was not only captivated by the flavor, they began to crave control over fire, but they didn't yet know how to create it. One day they saw another group guarding a carefully tended fire. These were other Homo erectus, who may have learned how to maintain flame. Tensions rose as the two groups faced off. Conflict seemed imminent. But then, a young leader stepped forward with a bold idea: exchange. His group mastered fire, while the other had techniques for crafting ornaments from hides. Thus, the seed of trade was planted, exchanging items along with knowledge. Thanks to such interactions, knowledge spread. From fire to craftsmanship, from tools to social organization, everything disseminated rapidly among human groups. A traditional language slowly formed, and over generations, skills were preserved, laying the foundation for flourishing culture. Unsurprisingly, fire quickly became a symbol of power and an essential tool across various regions. The young leader was also drawn to a woman in the other group. Perhaps at that moment, something new blossomed. A pairing, not born solely of reproductive instinct, but of choice, desire for connection, and a longing to live together. Ornaments made from teeth, feathers, or hide were created as expressions of emotion. Deeper bonds formed, and richer communal life began to emerge. Though these are speculative details, they offer a closer look at the birth of the concept of family. The taming of fire was a monumental milestone in human history. Beyond cooking, fire brought warmth, repelled predators, burned away disease, illuminated the night, and offered emotional comfort. They used fire to harden spear tips, improving hunting and survival. More importantly, fire paved the way for language development. The left brain began evolving, the larynx changed structure, speech became clearer and more complex. Now, Homo erectus could tell stories, recount the past, imagine the future, and pass on memories. Picture an old woman sitting by the fire telling younger generations tales of ancestors, journeys, victories, and losses. Who are we? Where did we come from? These questions were handed down through countless nights. Perhaps through those stories, humanity truly became human. Though we can't know how complex their narratives were, this is the closest glimpse into the human essence. Homo erectus continued to thrive, spread out, and adapt to all climates. Over thousands of years, different groups gradually diverged genetically, forming new human branches. The Peking man in China, Solo man in Indonesia, the tiny Homo floresiensis, Denisovans in Central Asia, and the robust Neanderthals in Europe. They learned to withstand cold, with lighter skin and hair. Meanwhile, in Africa, Homo erectus, or their descendants, kept evolving until a new species emerged, Homo sapiens, the wise human. This was the final leap. At one point, at least 6 different human species coexisted on Earth. Each group had its own culture, but this diversity did not last. Homo sapiens would replace them all. Around 100,000 years ago, perhaps even earlier, Homo sapiens began to appear in Africa. They were not only physically distinct, but superior in intellect, adaptability, and abstract thought. This was the greatest leap in the entire history of human evolution. In an ancient world populated by at least 6 human species, each with its own biological and cultural traits, Homo sapiens stood out as the only one capable of reshaping the world. They built complex societies, collaborated deeply, developed art, crafted sophisticated tools, established beliefs, symbols, and rituals. They painted, carved statues, made musical instruments, and used colors to express identity and emotion. They thought about death, imagined other realms, and began forming the concept of the sacred, the first steps toward religion. These abilities were not just inborn talents, but the result of an immense body of knowledge accumulated over millions of years. From Pyrrholopithecus swinging through the treetops to Tumai standing beneath the canopy, from Shai Sediba in arid forests to the tenacious Homo erectus crossing mountains and rivers. Every generation left behind a legacy: instincts, curiosity, compassion, cooperation, imagination, and belief. Built upon that foundation, Homo sapiens rose to become modern humans, inventors, artists, warriors, and philosophers. Around 100,000 years ago, they, like their ancient ancestors, began leaving Africa once more. But this time, it was not just a migration to survive, it was a conquest of the entire planet. They moved northward, crossed the Sinai Peninsula, followed the Indian Ocean's shores, reached the Middle East, then Asia, Europe, and even sailed to Australia. Some crossed the Bering Strait into the Americas. They went everywhere, settling in every type of land, from snowy mountains to deserts, grasslands to remote islands. Their footprints are now etched across the globe. On this journey, they sometimes encountered other archaic humans like Neanderthals or Denisovans. These meetings led to genetic exchange, traces of which still linger in our DNA today. Gradually, however, Homo sapiens became the only surviving human species. Scientists believe the extinction of others stemmed from a mix of causes: competition, climate shifts, technological and social superiority, or interbreeding that absorbed the other groups into the sapiens lineage. As Homo sapiens spread, they adapted to every environment. In sunny regions, darker skin protected against UV rays. In colder zones, lighter skin and hair helped absorb light. Body shapes, eye color, facial features diversified, but deep in our DNA we remain tightly connected. Because we all carry a shared legacy, a long, arduous, and miraculous evolutionary journey stretching back millions of years. Those genes were forged through countless generations. Honed by relentless survival trials, Homo sapiens, the wise humans, are the last surviving members of the Homo family, the final product of a journey sculpted by nature and ourselves. But this story, the story of humankind, is not over. In fact, it has only just begun.